Ever since we were kids, my parents always said my brother Milo had the spark. That was their word for it, like he'd been touched by some divine flicker the rest of us just didn't get. I remember once, Milo fixed a broken toaster. He tightened a loose wire. Honestly, more luck than skill, and you'd have thought he'd just split the atom. Mom lit up. Dad ruffled his hair, calling him a born problem solver. Meanwhile, I was at the kitchen table, clutching a printout of the first website I'd built. I was 10. By 14, I'd landed a young developer's scholarship, something rare, something big. I thought, this is it. My breakthrough. I remember standing in the living room, holding that certificate like it was fragile, like it might shatter if I breathed wrong. Dad was on the couch, watching Milo toss a football outside. I spoke carefully, certain this moment would finally matter. Dad, I got a scholarship. For coding. National program. He didn't even look at me. Just muttered, cool hobby, and went right back to watching Milo's perfect spiral cut through the air. That was my childhood. Bright, loud, and invisible. Family dinners? A script I could recite in my sleep. Mom would pass the mashed potatoes, laser-focused on Milo's latest business class story or his gym routine. His future was always soaring, limitless. Me? I'd sit at the far end, half hidden behind my laptop, tapping out lines of code in silence. They never once asked what I was working on. She's probably playing a game again. They'd laugh like that was all I'd ever be. Reed was the only person who ever really saw me. We met 5 years ago at a tech conference in San Francisco, drowning in a sea of people pitching themselves like used cars. He mentioned Gwen was his ex. I nodded. Didn't matter. He and I found each other in that quiet space under the shadows of louder people. He knew what it felt like to be overlooked. When my family spoke around me, Reed listened. When I started building something of my own, he believed. He was my anchor in a world that barely noticed I existed. At 24, I launched Velotech. No grand send-off, no champagne toasts from family. Just me, a dusty basement in Seattle, and this clawing need to prove I mattered. By 34, that need had turned into a $27 million company. Biotech startups, aerospace giants, Fortune 500s, they came to us. To me, landing the partnership with Cove Corp wasn't luck. It was years of pitch decks polished at 3 a.m., cold calls that got ignored until they didn't, doors slammed shut until one finally cracked open. No favors. No family connections. When I told my parents, my heart still stupidly hoping this time might be different, Dad didn't even flinch. Isn't that where Milo interned? He probably helped you get in. That hit like a slap disguised as a shrug. But it didn't crush me. It folded itself into the fire that had been burning for years. Then came the wedding invitation. Thick, overpriced paper that probably cost more than my first web project. Embossed lettering, gold trim, it screamed importance. But all I saw was what was missing. Milo, Aaron, Marcel, and Gwen Elise Cove, along with their families, invite you to celebrate. No mention of me. Not as his sister. Not as a business partner. Just another guest. An afterthought. But I held that invitation like a key. Maybe this was it. My chance to stand in a room where I didn't have to shrink just to fit. The Cove estate in Napa Valley looked like it had been ripped from the pages of a luxury magazine. Marble fountains, rare orchids perfuming the air. It was stunning and suffocating. Reed walked beside me, his hand brushing mine in that quiet, grounding way of his. He didn't need to say much. He was there. That was enough. Ready? He asked softly, already sensing the storm inside me. I was born ready, I lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But nothing could have prepared me for what was waiting at check-in. The assistant smiled, polite, practiced, and leaned in to whisper to a colleague. It was smooth, like they'd done this before. Instead of leading us toward the glittering ballroom, they guided us down a side hallway. The air changed. No more soft music or polite chatter. Just the sharp scent of industrial cleaner and the cold hum of fluorescent lights. My seat was a folding chair next to a mop bucket. A single place setting on a metal table in the kitchen. This must be a mistake, I said, my voice flat, tasting the bitterness as I spoke. The assistant dropped her gaze. It's your assigned seat. Reed's patience snapped first. He stepped forward, sharp, controlled. Call Gwen. Now. Minutes stretched into hours before Gwen appeared, gliding into the kitchen like she was walking a runway. Her dress shimmered, expensive, calculated. Her smile was polished, but beneath it, I saw the blade. We had limited space, she said, tone light, as if we were discussing napkin colors. Priority went to family and VIPs. I am family, I replied, voice steady. My chest felt like it was being crushed, but I didn't let it show. And without Velotech, your product launch would have crashed and burned. She glanced at Reed, something flickering in her expression, then looked back at me. It's just logistics. Nothing personal. A hollow laugh burst out of me. Loud. Sharp. It echoed off the metal shelves, bouncing back, angrier with every rebound. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It cracked open. Reed's hand found my arm, gentle. You don't have to stay. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not this time. Oh, I'm staying, I said, feeling something electric coil inside me. And they're going to regret this. Sitting there in that insult of a seat, I didn't cry. I didn't shrink. I felt every layer of invisibility peel away, slowly, methodically. Years of being overlooked didn't dissolve. They hardened. They sharpened. My hands rested calmly on that cold table, but inside, a storm was organizing itself. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next day, the media caught wind of everything. The headlines would come later. The public shaming too. I was thinking about precision. Purpose. Dignity. Cove Corp's prized biotech platform, the one they loved to show off as their crowning achievement, was entirely powered by software my team built. What they didn't know was that I had embedded a controlled vulnerability. Not to destroy, but to reveal. A digital signature designed to show just how fragile their empire was when built on a foundation they refused to acknowledge. That week, at a major tech conference in Silicon Valley, I set up a live demo. No drama. No bravado. Just a cold, clinical exposure of a flaw that couldn't be spun away. They wanted me to stay in the kitchen. But I was about to set the table. As the lights dimmed over the packed conference hall, a soft glow washed over rows of tense faces. Every seat was taken. Every breath was held. On stage, Cove Corp's CEO stood poised, wearing his best PR smile as the demonstration began. I stood just off stage, heart steady, hands ice cold, watching the lines of code I knew by heart dance across a giant screen. And right on cue, the system crashed. Not a glitch. Not a hiccup. A full, undeniable collapse. The screen flickered, and in that split-second silence, you could feel the audience shift. Confusion at first, then dawning realization. The CEO froze mid-sentence, his polished speech crumbling as murmurs swept through the room like a rising wave. In the front row, Gwen sat stiff in her custom-tailored suit, her face draining of color. She looked like porcelain, expensive, brittle, and cracking. I stepped forward. Every click of my heels echoed as cameras snapped toward me. I didn't have to raise my voice. The room had already gone still. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, letting the words settle into the heavy air, integrity isn't something you say for wedding vows and boardroom speeches. It's a commitment. One Cove Corp decided to ignore. Pause. Let it sink in. They put profit over safety, risking lives and data just to hit a launch date. No one moved. The silence wasn't empty, it was thick, electric. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, Cove stock started bleeding out, down 15% and still falling. Investors scrambled onto emergency calls, trying to contain numbers they couldn't spin. The once untouchable board was now in lockdown, scrambling behind closed doors to contain the mess they had created. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Executives I'd never met suddenly knew my name. Journalists who once parroted Gwen's polished PR statements were now calling me. We need your expertise. Are you open to new partnerships? How soon can we talk? But I wasn't chasing validation anymore. That hunger to be seen? It had found a new rhythm. Quieter, more deliberate. This wasn't about making noise. It was about telling the truth. Quietly, I had gathered more than code vulnerabilities. I had a dossier of internal emails and memos, timestamped, cross-reference threads showing how Milo and Gwen manipulated shareholder votes, cut backroom deals, and silenced engineers who dared to speak up. This wasn't sloppiness. It was a calculated, systemic erosion of ethics. And with the industry gala approaching, the same event where Milo was set to celebrate his glittering union with Gwen, I knew the moment had come. The Crystal Heights Hotel shimmered under the city lights, its grand ballroom humming with luxury. Crystal chandeliers scattered light like fractured diamonds, dancing across polished marble floors. A string quartet played softly, their delicate notes weaving through the cocktail murmur of San Francisco's elite. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. I walked in, every step deliberate. My black evening gown wasn't flashy, but it sculpted confidence into every line of my body. My hair was pulled back, exposing a neck that didn't bow anymore. My heels clicked softly, grounding me. Reed's hand rested at the small of my back, not guiding me, not shielding me, just steady. Present. Milo stood at the center of the room, champagne raised mid-toast, his grin wide and weightless. Gwen clung to his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light like a blade. Picture perfect. They always were. Curated to the last detail. But perfection has sharp edges. And I wasn't afraid to touch them anymore. We moved through the crowd, past gold-plated champagne trays, until I reached my place. Not at the fringes this time, but dead center. The microphone waited. The crowd hushed as I stepped forward, conversations thinning into a curious silence. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm but cutting through the room with ease. "I'm Elle Marcel, CEO of Velotech. Some of you might remember me as the sister who sat in the kitchen at this couple's wedding." Heads turned. Glances darted toward Milo and Gwen. I let that moment breathe. A gentle reminder of the hierarchy they had built. But tonight, I'm here to share what's really been happening behind these golden walls. The quartet stopped. Forks froze midair. Not awkwardness, but anticipation. I have with me a collection of verified internal communications, emails, documents, that expose deliberate manipulation of shareholder votes, falsified performance metrics, and a nepotistic culture that placed personal gain above ethical responsibility. I gestured to the giant screens flanking the stage. The first email popped up. Gwen's name. Milo copied in. Cold corporate language discussing how to sway votes, silence dissent. Then another. And another. Each message a crack spreading across the ballroom's polished veneer. Gasps filled the air. Murmurs followed. But I didn't rush. I let the truth do what it always does when it's finally given space. Resonate. "This isn't some petty family feud," I continued, scanning the sea of faces. "This is corporate fraud. Carried out openly, behind designer smiles and flashy press releases." Milo stood abruptly, his face stripped of charm. Gwen's grip on her wineglass tightened, her bracelet no longer sparkling but straining. "And because of this," I said, voice unwavering, Cove Corp is now facing formal investigations, class action lawsuits, and financial fallout that won't be spun away. So please, raise your glasses. Toast your marriage, Milo and Gwen. Just know that your celebration is the overture to a company collapsing under your lies." I didn't look away. Not out of defiance, but out of something more solid. Resolve. The years of being ignored, dismissed, shoved into the background. They didn't own me anymore. I wasn't speaking from a wound. I was speaking from a place finally strong enough to stand still. You kept me at arm's length. You laughed while I was sidelined. But I built the technology that held your empire together. And now you'll watch it fall. Not because I destroyed it, but because you were too arrogant to honor the hands that built it. You underestimated the woman you locked in a kitchen. The silence shifted. It wasn't stunned anymore. It was reverent. In the back, a CEO from a rival tech firm stepped forward. He didn't need to say a word. His handshake was firm, simple. And it said everything. What followed wasn't applause. It was the sound of tides turning. The gala didn't end with confetti or music. It ended with phones buzzing in pockets, screens lighting up with breaking news alerts. Cove Corp stock halted trading by morning. Milo and Gwen's resignations weren't demanded. They became inevitable. The truth had left them no place to hide. As my heels echoed on marble floors, I knew this wasn't a victory lap. It was simply the first breath of something new. Not a resolution. Just a beginning. 3 weeks later, I was back on a stage. But this time, everything felt different. The Elix Summit in Los Angeles wasn't just another stop on the tech circuit. This was the summit. The kind of event where deals were inked over champagne flutes and where visions turned into industries. The grand ballroom seemed to breathe with its own pulse, ceilings that stretched into the heavens, crystal chandeliers scattering light like constellations, and a crowd that didn't just attend, but witnessed. But tonight, that light wasn't aimed at a polished facade or a borrowed narrative. Tonight, it found me. I stood just behind the velvet curtain, palms open at my sides, not clenched in fear, not trembling from adrenaline. The weight in my chest wasn't nerves. It was something far steadier. A quiet, grounded fire. I wasn't here to prove a point. I wasn't here to reclaim space. I own my place now. The host's voice echoed through the ballroom, a slow, deliberate crescendo that wrapped around every marble pillar and velvet seat. Please welcome Al Marcel, founder and CEO of Velotech. The applause started as a polite ripple, but as I stepped onto the polished hardwood floor, it grew. It wasn't noise. It wasn't spectacle. It was a wave, a vibration that filled the bones of the building, shaking loose the stories of who was supposed to belong on that stage. Each step of my heels echoed with certainty. Not arrogance, not defiance, just presence. I wasn't walking to claim a spotlight. I was walking like the floor had always been mine. For a moment, I stood still, taking in the sea of faces before me. None of them had ever pulled out a chair for me. None of them had left space for me at their table. And yet, here I was, microphone in hand, no permission slip in sight. My family once told me I belonged in the kitchen. I began, letting the words breathe as they left my lips. Tonight, I want to make something very clear. No woman should ever be told her place. Not by her family. Not by her boss. Not by society. And definitely not by the people who are afraid of what she's capable of. The applause didn't hesitate. It crashed over me like a tidal wave, raw and alive, breaking through the carefully polished surfaces of the room. I smiled. Not the tight practice smile you wear when you're trying to survive a room. This one wasn't armor. It was mine. Unapologetic. Earned. Success isn't something you're handed, I said, my voice calm, yet it cut through the space like a blade. It's not a favor. It's not an invitation you wait for. It's built, brick by brick, through grit, through vision, and through the courage to keep standing when every voice around you tells you to sit down. I paused, not for effect, but because the truth deserved a moment to land. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, reverent. That's when I saw him. In the far corner of the hall, Hank Cove, Gwen's father. The architect of their so-called empire. He stood like a monolith, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. Gwen wasn't with him. Her absence used to sting, like a missing piece I couldn't stop reaching for. But tonight, it wasn't a void. It was just space. Space for something new to breathe. I spent years being invisible, I said, locking eyes with no one in particular, yet speaking to everyone in that room. Silenced. Overlooked. Minimized. I was the girl in the kitchen while others built their legacies. But while they celebrated their shortcuts and spotlight moments, I was building something of my own. Quietly. Relentlessly. Brick by brick. Bite by bite. And when I finally stood up to those who tried to keep me small, I didn't just find freedom. I found power. The applause this time was no longer polite. It was visceral. People stood. Some clapped. Some cheered. A few wiped their eyes. But beneath the noise, I felt something deeper. A stillness within myself. The storm had passed. The ocean remained. Vast. Unclaimed. Mine. Milo never called again. His silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't even noticeable anymore. Gwen's meticulously crafted invitations, the ones that used to arrive as veiled reminders of where I belonged, stopped showing up. Their absence didn't ache. It felt like breathing, like air finally clear. But not everyone had disappeared. Reed was still there, always a step behind, but never in my shadow. He didn't carry me. He didn't lead me. He just walked with me. And as the lights dimmed and the ovation thundered against the ballroom walls, his hand found mine. Not to anchor me, not to guide me, just to be there. Solid. Present. We stepped off the stage together, our strides falling into a quiet, even rhythm. I didn't glance back. Not out of defiance. Not out of dismissal. I didn't look back because there was nothing left to measure. I wasn't counting how far I'd come. I was walking forward because forward was the only direction that mattered now. The kitchen was behind me. The world, vast, imperfect, and beautifully unwritten, was ahead. And this time I wasn't just ready. I was hungry for it. Have you ever been through something like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Thanks so much for watching Rise with Sherry. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.